we're going to move to our global business updates now. I'm so sorry, Rotus, you have to kick off on such a somber note, but...
I had a full segment about 6 months, a year ago. We need guns. I've said this already. This is something that's been out there. We had a big debate on this. If the four of us run schools in the particular region of the country, and your school gets hit, and Ayo's school gets hit, and Dr. Abati's school gets hit, am I going to sit there like a sitting duck and not do anything? The measures have to be taken. So it's not about keeping hope alive and saying prayers. You have to protect yourselves. It's just like that. Anyway, let's get...
like Matawale in 2022.
Well, look, I mean, it's either you just sit in the region...
An admittance of failure of the government's ability to secure lives and property.
And two things can happen at the same time. You can admit that there's failure of leadership, and you can also protect yourself. Because I'm not going to allow my child or to get kidnapped in a particular... So something has to be done. So I know it's a constitutional issue. Yeah. Dr. Abati reminds me about that all the time, and that these are things that they have to be looked at.
Can lobby for it.
Yeah, but it has to be and like I've said, I put the numbers for everybody. A gun industry, it requires steel, Ajakuta steel. You can sell it, create jobs, pay taxes. It's like cars. You need a license, and you create jobs and make money and protect people. So something has to be done. It's pretty tragic. But anyway, the markets, it's pretty tragic in the markets as well. This is the sentiment for the markets across the globe. Sell, 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 sell. It was only yesterday that we were talking about, we were celebrating NVIDIA Day and how the markets had picked up. It didn't last at all. NVIDIA tanked. I mean, something happened. There was just a big swing. If you take a look at the US markets, we'll start there before we get to Asia yesterday. The S&P 500, within the space of, I think, about an hour and a half to two, lost over $2 trillion. So it was one of the biggest swings we had seen since Liberation Day. It was up about 2% intraday trading and then fell to minus 1.56, which is a swing of about negative 300 basis points. I mean, folks are still trying to figure out what happened. Dow Jones down. Look at the NASDAQ, particularly pronounced. NVIDIA, Micron. I mean, Walmart was up though, because Walmart is not a tech stock and they had pretty decent earnings. So that's what we're seeing here for the US markets. Also, the September jobs report came out yesterday, a bit dated, and maybe this is part of what is feeding into the negative sentiment in the US. Non-farm payrolls came in at 119,000. The estimate was 50,000 jobs. But look at this. We've had 3 straight increases in US unemployment, now to 4.4%. And if you remember some comments from Jerome Powell, I think at the last Federal Reserve meeting or prior to them, maybe it was Jackson Hole, he said that 4.5 is his pain point. So we're seeing this continued weakness in the US labor market. Average hourly earnings came in a bit under estimates on the monthly, but hourly, on a yearly basis, that did climb up again. A lot of Federal Reserve governors have been speaking since the results came out, and there seems to be a massive split within the voting governors on the Federal Reserve as to whether or not there'll be a rate cut or not. And I think that is also part of what's going on, in addition to the whole AI bubble worry. So that's on the jobs for the US. Now, Bitcoin, this is so interesting. Bitcoin, I remember it was only Tuesday, I think, or Wednesday, when I last talked about how Bitcoin had fallen from its high of $125,000 to $94 on Tuesday. As of this morning, it fell to 85. Before we came on air, it dropped again to 83. So this is like its biggest slide in about 6 months or so. I think around that, again, Liberation Day, that seems to be our flashpoint for a real market downturn. It was around $77,000. So we've seen a big sell-off in Bitcoin, a big sell-off in the US equity markets. It's just red everywhere you go. Although some can argue a buying opportunity, but where is the dip? They say buy the dip, but the dip could become a double dip or a triple dip, and you end up losing more money. Look at this chart. So this is just over 5 days, right? And I'm out of camera, so I just have to show you the volatility of Bitcoin over 5 days. This is where we are right now, and that's at 85,000. That when we took a snapshot of this chart, it's now at 83. I think it may have come up a little bit to 84. Who knows what this is? But look, markets now for the past 5 days, they're looking at their worst week in about 7 or so months. So that's Bitcoin. More red. I think we have more red now on the Asia side of things. So the Asian markets, look at that, blood red all the way from the Shanghai Composite Index, the Hang Seng, the Nikkei, the Kospi, the Nifty. They've tracked the same sell-off pressure. I mean, look at the Kospi. I mean, this thing has lost about 600 basis points now over the last 2 days. I'm not even sure if the Kospi is still the best performing index in Asia. It was as of last week, but the sell pressure has been pronounced. Why? Because the Kospi, Korea, is the would argue one of the semiconductor capitals of the world. You've got SK Hynix, you've got Samsung, and what has happened? Tech stocks. I mean, look at the Hang Seng. The Hang Seng Tech Index has been down almost 2%. That dropped. Japan as well, dropping as well. So again, it's just sell-off after sell-off after sell-off from the US to Asia, even Europe as well. Still some more news coming out of Japan. Takachi is planning a $135 billion economic stimulus. You folks who like her, she's a champion of the people, of course, but her balancing act right now is making sure this stimulus reaches the average, Japanese, who of course has been faced with rising cost of living. Inflation just came out, I think, this morning for October, and that's at 3% from 2.9 in September. Again, their target is 2%. Vimba and I were just talking before we came on air, so whether a 2% target is even realistic. The balancing act, though, is that on the one hand, she wants to make sure this stimulus reaches the people. On the other hand, she doesn't want to scare investors because Japan has the highest debt to GDP on planet Earth. I know most of that is denominated in yen, so it's domestic, but she's really, really focused on trying to help the people. But then how do you thread that needle? Also, on the other hand, lots of girl power in Japan. Our first ever, I think, finance minister, Satsuki Katayama, appointed, of course, by Takachi, has been talking about the slide of the Japanese yen. So Takachi, as I've said before, she's been averse to rate hikes for the Bank of Japan, and as a result of that, currency speculators have been betting against the yen that it will slide. So every time this happens, the yen now is about 157 to the dollar. But I think the last threshold was 155 or so. She came out and said this: "We are alarmed." This was a press conference just this morning. Finance Minister of Japan. "We are alarmed by recent one-sided sharp moves in the currency market. This is important for currency rates to move stably, reflecting fundamentals. We will take appropriate action as needed against excess volatility and disorderly market moves." So if you bought the yen at 157 and you think it's going to get to 160, she's warning you as a speculator that they will intervene and sell it, bring it down, and you'll lose your shirt. So we'll see what happens if Japan goes in there. Round off with Nigeria. The NGX released this domestic and foreign portfolio report. Foreign investors have come back in droves into the Nigerian stock exchange. It's still majorly driven by domestic investors. 2 trillion as of October 2025 in terms of transaction value. Haven't seen this number since about 2007. However, the Nigerian stock exchange has been on a slide. It has lost market. It has been down 4 days in a row now as of yesterday. Remember when we were talking about how it was up 50%? Our director of news for Lagos was just talking to me about how much he's lost in the last few days. But look, it's not out of line with what we're seeing globally. I think because at one point the market was up 50%. If you had put in ~1 million naira at the beginning of the year, you got 2 million sometime before the slide. So I think it might be profit taking and also all this other sentiments that's going on. That's our update for today.
Okay. Thank you very much, Rotus. We're told we've run out of time. But apart from inflation and defense issues that Sanai Takachi has to deal with, the bigger issue around that area is that she's now standing up to China, an emerging superpower. Yeah. And that is a big diplomatic tussle with Japan saying, oh, if China goes to Taiwan and intervenes, they will defend Taiwan, which is a red line that previous prime ministers of Japan didn't cross. But we'll see what happens. Thank you, Rotus.